Okay, so we're about to dive into a legal showdown that pits a legendary boxing promoter against a law that was literally designed to take down mob bosses. And it all comes down to one really weird question. Seriously, think about that for a second. Can a person conspire with themselves? It sounds like some kind of a philosophical riddle, right? But this very question was right at the heart of a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. So let's step into the ring and see what this is all about. All right, picture this, a championship boxing match. But instead of a ring, we're in a courtroom. The stakes, just as high. And the opponents, well, they're absolute giants in their field. In this corner, we've got the plaintiff, Cedric Kushner Promotions. And in the other corner, the defendant, you know him, the one and only Don King. Now, Kushner's team didn't just sue for something simple like a breach of contract. Oh no, they brought out the big guns. The accusation was that Don King had been running his entire operation using a pattern of corrupt activity. Basically, they were saying he was running his boxing empire like a criminal enterprise. And to make a claim that huge, Kushner's lawyers had to use a very, very powerful and pretty notorious federal law. And that law is, of course, the RICO Act. Yeah, if you've seen pretty much any mob movie made in the last 40 years, you've definitely heard of it. But what exactly is it? And what in the world does it have to do with a boxing promoter? So, the RICO Act became law way back in 1970, and it had one clear target in its sights: organized crime. It was a game changer, giving prosecutors this incredible new tool to go after mafia bosses, not just for one crime here or there, but for being the head of a whole criminal enterprise. But, and this is the important part for our story, it also has a civil side, which is exactly what Kushner's lawyers decided to use. So, if you want to win a civil RICO case, you have to prove three main things. First, that a person engaged in a pattern of illegal stuff, that's the racketeering part. Two, basically control or maintain an enterprise. Now, you got to pay really close attention here because the law makes a very specific separation between the person and the enterprise. And trust me, that little distinction is everything in this case. And that brings us right to the heart of this legal puzzle. This idea of separating the bad guy from the organization they're using. It sounds simple, but it's a surprisingly tricky legal concept, and it's absolutely critical here. So here's the problem, right? The million-dollar question the court had to figure out. When you have a company where one person, like Don King, is the only shareholder and he calls all the shots, isn't he basically the same thing as his company? I mean, where do you even draw that line? Okay, so here's how the law sees it. It looks at the person as the one doing the corrupting. They're the actor, the one pulling the strings. The enterprise, on the other hand, is just the tool, right? It's the vehicle that's being used to get the dirty work done. This analogy just makes it crystal clear. The law sees the person as the burglar and the enterprise as the getaway car. Simple as that. A burglar can't also be his own getaway car. One is the actor, the other is the instrument. The whole point of the RICO law was to punish the actor for corrupting that instrument. For the law to actually work, they have to be two different things. Okay, so with that crucial distinction in mind, how did the court actually apply it to the case against Don King? Let's get to the judge's decision and see how this all shook out. It really came down to two competing arguments. Kushner's team was saying, look, Don King, the person, is separate from his company, Don King Productions, the enterprise. But King's lawyers came back and said, hold on, Don King and his one-man company are the same thing. He is the enterprise, so he can't be accused of corrupting, well, himself. And you know what? The court agreed with King. The ruling was totally unambiguous. Under the RICO Act, the defendant person and the corrupted enterprise cannot be the same entity. Since Don King was the sole owner, the sole director, pretty much the whole shebang, he couldn't legally be accused of corrupting an enterprise that was, for all intents and purposes, just him. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so this is just a clever legal loophole for one famous promoter. But this ruling was about way more than just Don King. In fact, it reinforces a really fundamental principle of corporate law that has huge implications, far beyond the boxing ring. So what's the big takeaway from all of this? Well, first, the ruling upholds the idea that a corporation is legally a separate entity from its owner. This creates a kind of firewall. It also prevents this really powerful law, the RICO Act, from being used for just any old business dispute. It clarifies that the law is really meant to target outsiders who corrupt an organization, not a situation where the owner basically is the organization.
But this whole case leaves us with a really big question, especially in today's world, right? Where we have these larger-than-life founders who are completely inseparable from the companies they build. It really makes you think, in an age of these charismatic, all-powerful leaders, how does the law draw the line to ensure accountability when the person and the enterprise seem like the exact same thing?